Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today we're doing another Space Marine kit bash, but we're taking it back to the Rogue Trader era. If it's not obvious, and if you've been keeping up with the channel, I am on a bit of a Rogue Trader kick lately. This vastly different prototype era of 40k is just absolutely fascinating, and a rather large highlight is just how different the poster boys are in this setting compared to what we have now. However, there are a couple of really weird units that didn't survive into the modern setting, and I'm going to be kit bashing and painting them in this episode. However, our main attraction for this episode is none other than the Space Marine Field Police, a severely minor unit that's been regulated to maybe a couple of pages within the Rogue Trader rulebook, but I like the concept too much not to kit bash it. But before we get into all that kit bashing goodness, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to weekly Q&A streams in which I'll showcase your models. You also get exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, and above everything else, it just really helps me out. Huge thank you to my channel members, you guys are amazing. But, oh SpaghettiOs, this video is also sponsored by none other than Tabletop Stronghold. Foam carrying cases are great and all, but I run Gloomspite Gits, and it doesn't really help when you have foam combined with very pointy bits like this. And considering a good portion of my core miniatures are resin, I like having an option that's much more durable and safe. Only time you're ever going to worry about a magnetic case is if some little chuddy comes to game night with a cartoonishly large magnet. But if carrying cases aren't your thing, there's plenty of awesome MDF terrain you can get your mitts on from Tabletop Stronghold as well. But if that's not enough for you, the Black Friday sale is officially up on the 14th of November, and you can get up to 40% off your purchase. Now that's a freaking deal. Big thank you to Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video. But enough of the promotional stuff. Let's yammer about the Field Police. Now, what exactly were the Field Police? Now, while I do like to refer to them as 9-to-5 chaplains, it's a little bit more complicated than that, as chaplains were actually a thing in Rogue Trader. The role of the Field Police was primarily just to oversee the Loyalist Astartes, but not much else is known beyond that. They're essentially regulated to one solid image within the actual book. Much like the Rainbow Warriors, these guys were on one page and never really evolved into anything beyond a slight trickle of modern lore. But within recent memory, the Consul Overseers took their place, and I guess the Rainbow Warriors have, what are they called? The Death Strike. Kinda cool, but they're not Rainbow Warriors. The Overseer Consuls, on the other hand, really are an actual evolution of the Field Police. Their role on the battlefield is essentially to whip Imperial armies into shape to function acceptably alongside Space Marine legions, which is actually not a terrible idea. In its own right, this is a very interesting concept. However, these guys are regulated to the Horus Heresy setting, and I'll be the first to admit I don't entirely care for how they look. Sure, they have the black armor and the red helmet, and still bear the Sanghwada symbol, but they've just got that bit of Horus Heresy glow up that I think is a little overstated. I'm not a huge fan of the gold armor, and they're missing the hazard stripe. When it comes down to it, I do like joking that the Field Police are 9-to-5 chaplains, but these guys genuinely do look like mini chaplains. My goal is to basically emulate a beat cop style Space Marine. Something that I can both use in 30k and 40k if I so please. Speaking of which, let's actually get to the kit bashing. Now, as a base body for the Field Police officer, I decided to use the Rapier Squad Gunners bodies from the Horus Heresy line. I rarely see kit bashes utilizing these figures. What makes them so special is the overall design of the legs and the arms. While it wasn't often used for the miniatures, a lot of the art depicting Beakies featured these highly diagonal knee joints and elbow pads. There's also plenty of bits within this kit to make some amazing Iron Hands upgrades. But another key detail on why I'm using this kit specifically is the vast array of data pads and aspects. Hence why the first detail I'm adding to this figure is one of the data pads so he can write you a speeding ticket. Or I guess a space speeding ticket. I miss when everything had space in front of it in 40k. I would then also arm him with a bolt gun that comes with the base kit. And already so far, I really haven't kit bashed anything. But we're about to change that up. To really keep him in line with the original Beakies, I decided to adorn his shoulders with Mark VI Corvus pauldrons. The classic studded and smooth pauldron really bring this figure together. If there's one thing I don't really care for with the Rapier Squad is the pauldrons. And if you're at all familiar with my content, you'll know that the beaky pauldrons are definitely my favorites. I just don't like gluing them together all too much. But with that detail all finished up, I then decided to go even further by adding on some techie bits. While the actual Rapier Power Pack does feature a little tracker nodule, it's just a little too spindly and breakable for my taste. Plus, if it were up to me, I would rather have this as an optional build rather than built onto the power pack. I decided to replace it with a far more modest bit from the Incursors kit, this being their version of the tracking nodule. However, in my mind, this bit will be utilized as a gargantuan flashlight that will be shined in your face when you're asked if you knew how fast you were going. With just a little bit of super glue, I managed to fit this onto the two nodules next to the exhaust port on the power pack. But what really sealed it in was a little bit of Tamiya. I was just a tad worried I'd have to drill into the power pack to make this fit better, but with those two elements, it fit just fine. Next bit I decided to add is not necessarily a Kitbash because it is just its own thing. Well, no, it's a Kitbash, it came from a different kit. I just like servo skulls. However, we haven't really invoked all too much that this guy is a cop. So I decided to steal a little bit from the Adeptus Arbites kit in the form of this little satchel and handcuffs. However, this did not fit nicely to the Space Marine. It did take a little bit of finagling to get this in place, mostly just breaking it down the middle and shaving off the little fist logo. I'm actually really surprised just how difficult this was to build onto the figure, and getting it to glue was kind of a pain in the ass. I couldn't even use Tamiya, I actually had to use super glue for this. When it comes down to it, all the effort was worth it because I really do think this is an essential bit to the model. Otherwise, he kinda does just look like a generic beaky that would be befitting for the Iron Hands. But this figure is too goddamn expensive to simply kitbash as a regular tactical marine. However, we are missing one key feature, that being a helmet. For this, I decided to utilize one of the beaky helms from the Dark Angels Ravenwing set. I probably could have used a generic beaky helm from the Horus Heresy line, but I'll be the first to admit I'm not really a huge fan of how tiny and eggy they are. Which in all honesty is actually something I feel very strongly about most of the Horus Heresy Space Marines. I know it's in a bid to make them look a little bit more realistic, but again, I love heroic scale, and I just love how angular the tactical marine beakies are. And the little antenna on the side of the helmet really does bring this together. The only thing I really had to do to change this up to make it fit better was to slice off the skulls. Sure, they definitely look cool, but I definitely think this looks a lot better as a Baron helmet for the freehand, which is another little detail that I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to the Overseer consoles. Miss the hazard stripes. However, since the helmet is vastly different in terms of colors compared to the main power armor, I opted to drill them out on the bottom and add in a paper clip mounted on a paint pot. That way I can spray down the helmet separately. And it also gives me plenty of room to actually do the freehand I want to do in terms of the hazard stripe. With all the prepping done, the first thing I did with the power armor is I would spray it black and stipple over it with a sponge using Dark Eternal Night from Bear Cavalry Paints. I do like the idea of painting this simply as black armor, but I thought a slightly bluish black would contrast nicely with the bright red helmet. These stippling little sponge brushes are pretty perfect for this too. But moving on from the black for now, I decided to paint just about everything on this model that was silver with dark silver, and originally I decided to paint the power pack the same color as the armor, but the original image does seem to feature a silver power pack. So I opted to go over this using a mixture of metallic silver from Vallejo Game Color and just a little bit of the dark silver. From everybody I've seen online that's painted the Field Police, they just paint the power pack black, but I thought the silver would be interesting as it stands out more. Another thing I really like about the Rapier Squad in terms of their design that is befitting of the original Space Marines is instead of the coils between the joints, they have the original somewhat felt-like substance. Just a fun little detail I quite like. Rather than simply painting them black, I decided to use kind of a light gray. But to kind of stray away from the much more boring parts of painting, I had to do a little freehand in the form of the Field Police symbol, or like I referred to earlier, the Sanghwada. The symbol isn't really expanded upon within the Rogue Trader book, however, in the Horus Heresy, this symbol is yet again used by the consuls and the consuls Essequiary. Saying this out loud, I'm realizing this symbol doesn't really have much lore other than it's used. But after sketching out the original symbol using the red, I would then fill it in using some bright yellow. I did end up doing something later with this paint job that I think maybe obscured it a little bit more than I wished it would, but I still like how this looks, and it'll just be an example of what not to do in the future. However, I do think these bright yellow colors standing out from the red are pretty much perfect from what I'm going for. As for the helmet, I primed it using some white and sprayed over using a mixture of dark red and orange red from Acryl. I then paint the eyes black as the original design designates, however I gotta give kudos to my homie Pancreas for referring to them as built-in cop shades. Now that is some world building. However, when it comes to painting the hazard stripes, I decided to use a mixture of dark sun yellow mixed with a little bit of warped yellow from Tooth and Coats. I originally thought painting the yellow was going to be a nightmare, mostly because I'm used to just relying on contrast colors, but all things considered, this was a very smooth application. The only thing that you really need to worry about is staying consistent with painting it on the beak itself. It's most definitely a lot more difficult to freehand over a beak, hence why I didn't get any footage of actually painting the black stripes because I was holding the miniature to my tummy. However, as you can see, the initial batch of stripes are very disproportioned. If I had a little bit more time, I probably would have been a lot more neater with this, but in a bit of kind of working backwards to make time a little bit easier for myself, I decided to splotch some paint strips over the actual design using the orange-red mixture that I used for the base tone. As you probably know, I like having grungy beat-up Marines, and having a tiny bit of weathering allows me to get away with some shoddier details. But don't get it twisted, I did plenty of cleanup to actually make the lines look far more proportional after the splotching. All it required was a little bit of cleanup using the yellow and the black. Once the pattern was in a place that I was really happy with, I then decided to glue the head onto the model. I also used just a slight amount of ghost gray mixed with black and a touch of white in the lenses. Nothing super special for painting the eyes, in fact, I would even suggest just simply using gloss varnish if you want to. Now, things did get a little bit questionable here as I decided to streak and grime over the miniature just to kind of tie things in together. I thought it'd be kind of fun to do so, to kind of give a grungy look, however, it did kind of water down the symbol. What I used was a mixture of streak and grime mixed with a little bit of brown wash from AK Interactive. And I don't think it completely dulled down everything too much, but it definitely dulled down the red on the symbol to the point that it's a little obscured, and I do think it misses a little bit of the vibrancy it once had. I don't entirely regret it, as I do really like how it ended up looking overall. It really did make shading the miniature not so tedious, but I'll be the first to admit it was a bit of a crutch, and maybe not the most effective one. But I like how it looks above everything else. Once everything was varnished and ready to paint once again, I then added a little bit of a highlight to spruce up the main armor. And again, I definitely made it maybe a little bit more blue than I should have, but I like how it looks. With those final details complete, I was left with an amazing field police officer. I really like this model. Sure, maybe it isn't the most interesting concept for everybody, but to me, for whatever reason, this model is just so captivating. Sure, it got fleshed out rather well in the Horus Heresy, but the Rogue Trader era is so vastly different from what we have now, so I can't help but ponder on what these guys could have been. And as for the actual model, it's not really a sophisticated kit bash. I did in a roundabout way essentially reinvent the wheel to make him look like a beaky with just a little bit of extra tech. If I really wanted to, I simply could have just painted one of the regular beakies with the Field Police color scheme. But that's not very interesting, is it? I don't really know if there's actually a place in the modern setting for these guys, but barring the stars align and I actually get to play a little bit of Rogue Trader with some friends, you bet your ass I'm fielding this dude. But though the main event is technically over, I do have a little extra something to pad out this video. Another truly bizarre unit within the Rogue Trader era comes from none other than the White Scars. This being an elite unit known as the White Scars Soul Drinkers Elite Squad. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think happened here. They decided this has too many cool keywords and design points that they decided to completely split everything up and make it its own lore. It is a White Scars unit with another chapter's name and another chapter's logo. Obviously, White Scars and Lamenters and Soul Drinkers are different chapters. This is kind of where this whole sort of thing ends. Really, I just wanted an excuse to make something a little weird. This was more of a larf on the side, and really it's nothing that special. I essentially just decided to kitbash a regular assault marine, because, like the actual unit in the lore, it's not really anything that special either. They're just essentially assault marines with refractor shields. I mean, at the end of the day, I love a good assault marine. I love a chainsword, I love a bolt pistol. In this case, I gave him a plasma pistol. But this isn't really anything that out of the box. I just kind of see it as an example of what wargames typically are like when they first start out. Things that seem cool on the surface get shifted around to have better purposes, and I think the White Scars are better off from not having this unit. To put it quite bluntly, this symbol is not even remotely fitting for the White Scars. To clarify, I am only referring to the modern version of the White Scars. The Rogue Trader iteration was not the Mongolian space bikers we know and love, and honestly on its surface it looks just fine. With the modern White Scars, however, having a 14th century medieval symbol on a Mongolian space marine does feel a little off, which is exactly what happened with the result of this miniature. I kinda did have a plan of maybe doing something similar with the White Scars symbols, by using a little bit of purple by integrating the color scheme of the Soul Drinkers, but maybe that'll be something we tackle another day. I mostly just wanted to see how the symbol looked on a basic White Scar, and if I'm being honest, this is the first time I've ever painted a White Scar. For something I did in roughly an hour, it's not too bad. I mean, I'll be real, it's not great by any means, it's far from my best work, but for something I did in such a short period of time, it's fine. And when it comes down to it, it really is just a little extra B-side for this video. When all said and done, I do think Rogue Trader is one of the most captivating books I've ever sunk my teeth into, because it's just really captivating to see things that were once just a simple single page being fleshed out into something with tons of books and lore, especially for an army like the White Scars. And weird units like the Field Police. But there's a ton of more kit bashes I'd love to do from the Rogue Trader era. I've talked extensively about doing a big video on kit bashing him, and I almost just think it'd be better to just do weird one-offs like this and combine them into one huge video. There's definitely plenty of weird color schemes I'd love to tackle, different guard units and regiments, but that'll have to wait for another time. But don't be shy in the comments to let me know what kind of weird schemes you'd like to see painted. For now, I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video. So like always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kit bash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.